everyone. Thank you for joining today's OHSU Innovates Speaker Series webinar. This quarterly speaker series aims to engage the entrepreneurial community with inspiring stories of success and lessons learned to break down barriers and catalyze a more equitable and innovative future. My name is Nicole Garrison, and I am a program administrator in OHSU Technology Transfer. And I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming you all today to our session called Advancing Care, Nonprofits Driving Rare Disease Innovation. In just a few moments, we will be hearing from two innovators that each launched nonprofit organizations to advance medical research and therapies for rare genetic diseases. I cannot wait to introduce these two amazing individuals momentarily, but first I'm just going to make a couple announcements. Next slide, please. Today's programming is brought to you by OHSU Innovates, a collective network of departments working together with OHSU members and external partners to advance innovation and entrepreneurship. OHSU Innovates provides services and programs in areas of intellectual property protection, collaborations, agreements, entrepreneurial education, and startup support. We urge those interested in learning more to connect with us through our website or email listed on this slide. We'd also like to give a quick acknowledgement of the OHSU Innovate sponsors that help make programming like today's possible. The sponsors include GE Healthcare, Leon Hayes, Schwalbe Williamson and Wyatt, Stern Kessler, Kilpatrick Townsend, Clark West, and Stoll Reeves. Finally, before we start, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. Please enter any questions into the Q&A box, and they will be queued and ready to read after the presentations. And as a reminder, this webinar will be recorded, and we ask that you please turn off your video and remain muted. Today's speakers include Dr. Penny Hogarth of the Spoonbill Foundation and Tommy Pham of the Raiden Science Foundation. Both of these innovators are very accomplished, and I'm afraid my brief introductions of both of them today will not do them nearly the justice that they deserve. But I'm going to try my best. Our first speaker, Dr. Penny Hogarth, is a professor of molecular and medical genetics and neurology at OHSU. She's a clinical neurologist with expertise in movement disorders. Her interest in rare genetic diseases began while caring for patients with Huntington's and other inherited diseases. Early in her OHSU career, she met Dr. Susan Hayflick in the Department of Molecular and Medical Genetics, who had recently found the gene for ultra-rare disorder. That disorder would come to be called pantothenate kinase-associated neurodegeneration, or PKAN. What followed was a 25-year odyssey from the bench to the bedside, from the gene to a treatment, always inspired and driven by families affected by the disease. Please join me in welcoming Penny Hogarth. Penny, the floor is yours.
I think you have to stop sharing and then I can. Okay. So let me see if I can make this magically happen.
Looks great.
Do you have the correct version? Okay. So one other small change I'm going to just make to my own view here. Okay. All right. So thank you first for this invitation to speak, and I will try to keep this to time. So I'm going to not so much tell the story of the scientific journey. That is actually the topic of a presentation I'm doing in Neurology Grand Rounds on December 4th, if anybody wants to hear that part of the story. But today is really focused on the nonprofit foundation story and how that came into being and what it led to, what the challenges were, and such like. So, first things first, this always begins with when you are a physician, when you are a parent, when you are a human. This always begins with a story of a child affected with one of these many rare diseases. And in this case, PCAN is the disease of interest that we're talking about today. I have permission from this family to share a little bit about this child's story. This is one of our two Oregon patients with the disease. This is an ultra rare disease. There's about 1 to 2 per million population affected with PCAN, so it is a very rare disease. These children are born looking really pretty normal, and parents think they have a healthy child, and then in a very short amount of time, the child starts falling. They develop these terrible twisting movements that can become so severe they can literally snap their limbs. And in fact, this little boy, who is now not such a little boy, he has survived into late teenage years and is doing much better. He has been in our ICU here at Dornbecker at OHSU many times, has had broken limbs, has had a pretty terrible time with it. And there is no disease that affects children that is not heartbreaking, but I would say that PCAN is a disease that causes true suffering, and it can only capture you. And that is what it did to me as a physician, as a clinical scientist, and really kind of held my interest and really passion to move therapeutics forward for the disease over time. So that's the setting. We wanted to we had an opportunity because of the nature of this disease. It is, I'm not going to go into great details about the background of the disease, but it is what's called an inherited, an inborn error of metabolism. So these kids can't process a vitamin normally, and they have a genetic mutation that means that they can't process a B vitamin normally. And because of the nature of the disease, we had an opportunity to develop a kind of an approach to management or treatment of the disease, taking a nutritional approach. And that gave us an opportunity to move through the FDA to approval of a compound, not via a drug route, but via a food route, taking a nutritional approach. And it was partly that sort of triggered us thinking about how we might do this in a way that was not the traditional drug development approach, which often is prohibitively expensive. We've since changed our thinking about some of that, but more about that later. However, it was with a potential therapeutic in mind that we started thinking about the formation of a nonprofit organization. What we needed to do was to figure out how to fund the early work, which is not something that one can typically get large grants for. We had to figure out how to make the stuff. So the compound is not something that turns out to be very easy to make at all. It's an alternative to the B vitamin that can't be processed. It's a downstream compound, and it turns out to be incredibly difficult to make. And we worked with the OHSU pharmacology folks here, really amazing people here at OHSU, to make tiny, tiny, tiny amounts, milligram amounts, to figure out a synthesis method. And we very quickly got good advice from them to move that into a commercial setting, because we were not going to be able to scale up production in an academic facility. We required an industry partner. And that brought the realization that we were going to need big money. And how were we going to get big money without funding? So we started with small grants. Most of those were local. So I want to just call out the NBA Disorders Association is a parent organization for PCAN and for other related disorders. They gave us a small grant to fund some of this initial work. And I'm talking tens of thousands up to $50,000, $60,000. Dornbecker Children's Hospital gave us a small grant to help with initial work. Collins Medical Trust, these are all local grants. NBA Disorders Association is a national and actually international organization. And then I particularly want to call out Oak Tree. Today is a presentation that is really coming from the Tech Transfer and Oak Tree groups. Oak Tree gave us something called a Biomedical Innovation Grant. This is a program that helps investigators at OHSU to take an idea and to commercialize it. It has been focused on drug and device development in a more traditional route. And I would say that our project really was the first to propose doing something in a nonprofit setting. And that, I think, challenged the organization, challenged OHSU, challenged the Biomedical Innovation Program, but to their credit, they were open to it. Tech Transfer, Travis Cook in particular, who now heads Tech Transfer, was really instrumental in helping us to think about how we could do this and still stay aligned with OHSU's mission. And the Biomedical Innovation Program paired us with Jonathan Jubera and with an Entrepreneurs in Residence program. Dick Rylander is somebody who comes from an industry background who helped to advise us on the pathway. So this small grant, which I think was around $60,000, really helped us sort of think about the mechanism and process and helped to mentor us. Ultimately, we got a very large grant to fund the clinical trial from the National Institutes of Health, and that was instrumental when we got to the point of therapeutics. So this is just a sort of a quick infographic that comes from the Biomedical Innovation Program to give you a sort of picture of how it works. And it was really this sort of customized mentoring, the seed grant that we got. Some of this has sort of expanded since we were one of the early ones to have this grant, I think. But we really benefited from this program in a very big way. So I wanted to, particularly in this setting, acknowledge the BIP, the Biomedical Innovation Program grant that we got. So how did, sorry, it's not advancing quite the way I wanted to. So then we got the idea. This wasn't exactly linear, and I don't exactly remember what order things happened in, but at some point, we were working very closely with collaborators in the Netherlands. This is, whoops, sorry. Ooh, goodness. This is Odie Sibone in the Netherlands. She is a PhD scientist, a fly biologist who has a great interest in pecan and really, unlike many basic scientists, has been very laser focused on trying to think about translational research, moving things. Oh, sorry. Can't seem to get this thing to not jump. Very focused on moving into therapeutics for people affected, children and adults affected with this disease. She introduced us to Hans Hector, shown here. He is in the tech transfer office at University Medical Center Groningen. These two are both in the Netherlands and have been long-time Odie has been a long-time scientific collaborator. Susan Havelick is my partner in crime and science and every other way here at OHSU, the discoverer of the pecan gene. And she and I, together with our amazing team that we have, scientists and genetic counselors and clinical researchers, have been really working here at OHSU. It was a very casual meeting in the Netherlands between Odie, Susan, Hans and I, where we developed this idea just over a glass of wine and a nice meal that we needed to form foundations, and we formed sister foundations, the Spoonbill Foundation here in the US, and then Lepela Stichting in the Netherlands, is the sister foundation in the Netherlands. And we then set about fundraising. And what did that fundraising look like? Well, we put out an appeal to families, and we made a video. So jumping back a minute, we first of all, again, through just talking to people, asking for help, we formed a nonprofit corporation. We got help from the Oregon Department of Justice's website, told us how to do that. It's actually not quite as complicated as you might think. We set up a small nonprofit. We realized there were some components that we would need help with. So we actually approached a B corporation legal entity, Imix Corporation, who have been very generous and helpful to us. They have offered us limited legal counsel when we need it, and have provided a sort of a mailing address for donations to come to, which has been helpful for us, and given us advice along the way on various issues. So Imix Corporation gets a shout out as well. And then we set up this foundation, and then we made a video again through talking to people. We found a very generous person who donated some in-kind time, and for a very modest fee made us a fundraising video, which I thought about showing, but I don't think we quite have time for. And so it is available on YouTube if you want to go find it. But that video provided the catalyst for some funding. We put out the word to our families, and the families, man, they are the force to behold. There is nothing so powerful as families whose children are affected by this disease. They mobilized in a way that was just astonishing. And I want to give just two examples of we let them loose and said we need funding, and they went away and fundraised and donated to the Spoonbill Foundation. And this was all the way from the small town in Southern Oregon where that boy whose picture I showed you at the beginning, these are his classmates in this little tiny town in Butte Falls, Oregon. And again, I have permission to share that information. These kids, they're his classmates. I just love this picture. They had a lemonade stand every week in the summertime. Lemonade, 25 cents or donation. All the money goes to pecan research. And they raised money, and they would send us envelopes with quarters and dollars in it every few weeks. And sometimes that came in a check, and sometimes it was small amounts, and sometimes it was surprisingly large amounts. They have had Christmas tree sales there. They have had collaborations with any number of small businesses down in Southern Oregon. And then in sort of the other end of we've had golf tournaments, ice bucket challenges done by families all over the country. And in another remarkable story, in a small community, not in this state, but elsewhere, a family affected by pecan had not one, but three children affected by pecan, one boy and then some identical twins who were sort of identified as having the disease before their brother's disease had really, shortly after their brother's disease was diagnosed, they were found also to have the same disease. And so this poor family had all three kids affected by this really terrible disease. Dad operated a business, and he worked with, he cleared land for new housing developments. And he worked with another small business who built custom homes, and they approached all of their subs, all of the businesses in their small community, and somehow mobilized everybody to donate time and materials to build this custom home, which they then sold and donated the funds to Spoonbill. It was one of our most remarkable and formative gifts. So just two extremes of what can happen with the power of families. So what are our next steps? And I think in the questions and such, we're going to talk about some of what the challenges were along the way. So I'm not going to address that right now, but we'll do that during the question and answer section. So we have now, where we're at, we were able to scale up production of our compound. We were able to make large quantities of it. That had to be done with a commercial entity. It required a great deal of money and a great deal of regulatory oversight to make sure we did everything right. We have worked with the Food and Drug Administration since we had the first idea before we even knew we could make the stuff. The FDA has actually been amazingly helpful to us in helping to shepherd us through this process. We got funding to do a clinical trial. We conducted the clinical trial, which started 2 months before the pandemic started, but because it was being done as a remote clinical trial, the trial proceeded without interruption largely until the very end when the deep freeze event in Texas derailed us a little bit. We completed that trial. We are currently preparing a submission to the FDA for approval of our compound. So it is a beautiful arc. There's more to do. The nutritional compound is, in our mind, something of a placeholder as a treatment approach to PCAN. Our next goal is to develop gene therapy, and we are actually well on the way to that. And potentially the Spoonbill Foundation, together with partner foundations who are really helping us to fund that even bigger project. That is our next PCAN work. And there's other diseases that fall under this same umbrella, and potentially Spoonbill Foundation will provide a mechanism to move therapeutics forward in that. We have to figure out how to import our nutritional compound. That has some challenges. There's some regulatory issues that we've got to solve. And we have to figure out a synthesis place and all of that. And then we have to figure out how to market it, because marketing under a foundation is not a easy thing to do. We plan to develop a B corporation, and I can speak more about that during the question and answer session. I think those are all my slides, except this one. I don't exactly have permission to show this. This was a cover on the New York Times quite a couple of years ago. It was about women extreme surfers. This is one of the world-class surfers of the world. I totally love this picture. And every now and then I come back to it, look at it, because it is the way I feel most days. Failure is impossible. We are on a path. We cannot fail. This wave is scary as hell sometimes, but we are going to ride it until we're done with this disease. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Penny. I'm glad I had my box of tissues next to me, because once I saw the lemonade stand, I just felt my eyes immediately get teary.
I mean, how can you not love that, right? Those kids. Oh my gosh, I totally love that.
Oh, just a wonderful story, and I look forward to hearing more from you during the Q&A session.
Well, keep the box of tissues, because I'm pretty sure Tommy is going to make you cry as well.
I have a feeling. I have a feeling.
As I said, there is nothing more powerful than a parent affected with this disease. And so in our next speaker, I think you will hear that voice coming from a different perspective. And so I too am looking forward to it. Thanks. I'll put myself on mute now.
Our second speaker, Tommy Pham, a passionate advocate for education and entrepreneurship. As you will hear today, he is particularly devoted to propelling forward rare disease research, advocacy, and education. In addition to being a founder of the Raiden Science Foundation, he's a co-founder of the Children's Cancer Therapy Development Institute with Dr. Charles Keller, and a co-founder of the epigenetic drug discovery and development startup in Zumbe with James Stafford. Tommy is also active in mentoring and teaching entrepreneurship within the community. And all of this is in addition to his day job at Nike, on top of all that. Tommy has been a recipient of numerous awards, including being named one of Portland Business Journal's 40 Under 40 in 2022. Please join me in welcoming Tommy.
Thanks, Nicole. That was an awesome intro there. Thank you. Hey, everyone, let me pull up my presentation. So, similar to Penny's presentation and story, we started a foundation. My son has a rare disease called UBA5, which I'll get into it in a little bit here, but you'll get to hear it from a parent perspective because my son is going through this. I'm going through this at this very moment in a race against time. One second here. I gotta make sure I share the audio, but I forget. Sorry for the delay here. There we go. Checking to make sure everyone see the screen. All good?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, cool. So before I dive in, just want to show a quick 1 minute video of our foundation so you can get a visual and feel of what our foundation is about.
Bringing our son Raiden into this world was filled with so much hope. Hope for his future, hope for his relationship with his sister, and hope for our growing family.
That hope vanished the day we got his diagnosis. When Raiden was a baby, we spent months in the hospital, not knowing what was wrong. The days that we envisioned would be spent watching Raiden learn to crawl or say his first words were instead filled with months in the doctor's office, a lack of answers from physicians, and tests after test after test.
We now know that Raiden suffers from an ultra-rare disease called UBA5 disorder, a scientific name for a disease that means that he cannot walk, talk, sit, or use any of his limbs.
Ultra-rare kids are an invisible population. For them, there is no treatment, there's no cure, and there is next to no funding.
My husband and I were left heartbroken and depressed beyond belief, but we still had Raiden, and we knew he needed us.
This is why through hard work, time, and constant relationship building, we built the Raiden Science Foundation. Now, we are racing the clock as we work to raise money to fund life-saving gene replacement therapy for Raiden.
But also for other families just like ours. With your help, we will have hope again. Hope for the future and hope for our son.
Please join us. No donation is too small. So that was our campaign video for last Giving Tuesday. So it's about a year. And if nothing else, hopefully it shines through. Like our foundation is all about hope. And so you see that as we go through the presentation and all the things that we're doing. So it's been about a little over 3 years since Raiden was diagnosed at OHSU through whole exome sequencing. So when we found out of his diagnosis, which is UBA5 gene mutation, like everyone has that gene, his is just mutated. There was no treatment at the time when we got diagnosed back in August of 2021. There's no targeted treatment, right? And there's nothing FDA approved. There was no translational research. There was basic research, but very few because the disease itself was only discovered back in 2016, which is a relatively, I can't even speak right now, relatively new disease. And so it was very tough. It was a tough moment for our family. Like, literally our heart just stopped. We just felt like dying. It was just depressing. You want to have a child, you want to bring them in the world and have this family and joy. Like we had to throw that out the window, right? And so with that, we're on a journey to change fate, not only for Raiden, but also for other kids suffering from UBA5 as well. And so UBA5 is an ultra-rare disease. We only know of about 50 kids in our community. 50, I'm talking about 50 in the world. So it's really, really, really rare. I'm sure there's hundreds that are diagnosed. Symptoms present differently across different kids. Like Raiden's presented as quadriplegic cerebral palsy, and that's on the mild side. There's even worse, right? So a lot of these kids have motor control issue, cognitive issue, including a lot of seizures every day, and growth issue as well. And so if you think about it, our community is pretty small. We started with like 50 that we know of in our community. In the past, 2.5 years alone since 2022, unfortunately, 10 have passed away. 10 out of 50 is a significant amount within our community and population, unfortunately. So When I say we were racing against the clock, we were racing against the clock, like really. And so that's why we started the Raiden Science Foundation to move forward to pave a path for like treatment for a cure for UBA5 because there was none. And so that's what we're doing. So we started the Raiden Science Foundation. The very first thing we did was we set out a strategy. Like, what's our mission? To make it simple, our mission is to harness the power of community to develop cures for rare disease, starting with UBA5 disorder. That is our mission. Our vision is to go broader than that. We hope, through this journey, all the things that we learn, how to create the treatment, how to create gene therapy, how to do drug repurposing, that ultimately in the future, we can make the impossible possible for rare. And rare can mean the family, it can mean the patient, it can mean the researcher, right? And then our focus every day through the foundation is to relentlessly raise awareness and connect the world research to innovate life-saving research. That's our focus every day. That's my focus every day when I wake up for the foundation. So fast forward about 3 years since we got Raiden's diagnosed back in August of 2021, we have created an entire ecosystem for UBA5 research, right? We have research going on at Oregon Health and Science University for drug repurposing. And we got a seed funding from the biomedical innovation program that Penny mentioned about, and it's being led by Jonathan right now. We have RNA therapy research happening at St. Jude's as well under Heather. We're creating mouse models and fly models of UBA5, which is very critical for research. We need animal models, right, in order to test those treatment. We have that going on at Baylor College of Medicine. And then to your bottom right, we have a lot of basic research and tool happening as well. I'm not going to go through each one. But just to step back, within 3 years, we really accelerated research effort from nothing to something, right? We also have a gene therapy program at UMass as well. We're in about the second year going on the third year right now for gene therapy. We have done feasibility study, efficacy study in an animal model, and now we're getting ready to do toxicology and engaging with the FDA for pre-IND. The problem with gene therapy, it's very expensive. It costs $4 million. And so as a small organization trying to fund gene therapy, along with other research program we have, it's hard. Fundraising is hard for any foundation, let alone an ultra rare disease organization, right? Like people just don't fund it. So how do we raise money to move forward all of our research program? We lean on the community. We know that if I were to spend time writing a grant, chances are I won't get the grant because it's an ultra rare disease. It's really hard. I can't compete against other rare disease or other more common disease as cancer. It is what it is. And so we lean on our community to fundraise. And we have done a ton of fundraising activity this past 3 years. Here are some of them. I'm not going to go through every single one. This year alone, we're doing 8 different fundraising activity, including Giving Tuesday this December. We've done our 7. Our last one is Giving Tuesday. But our most powerful way to fundraise and to relentlessly raise awareness is through our gaming community. And then for those that don't know, Raiden is actually named after the Mortal Kombat character, Raiden. And so we lean into Raiden, we lean into Mortal Kombat, we lean into the gaming community because there's 3.2 billion gamers out there. So imagine how powerful that can become. And so as part of our foundation, we started a campaign, an extension of the Raiden Science Foundation called Fight for Rare. And so we are leaning into the gaming community to raise awareness, raise attention, raise funding for UBA5 research, and to bring attention to like overall rare disease, right? And then how are we doing it? We create a platform. So if you're a gamer, you can log in, you can play game, you can stream online. And as you're streaming online, you're talking about UBA5, you talk about these rare kids. So you're bringing attention awareness to a population that normally don't hear about rare disease and get their interest and get their attention. Because if I were to spend my time and resources to go to a lot of like events, convention and rare disease community or biotech, I'll be speaking to the same pool, of people. It's going to be hard to fundraise versus doing something outside of the box and different. And so, yeah, organically, we have grown the past 2 years with Fight for Rare. We work with a lot of influencer and creators and entertainer as well. We're slowly getting support from a lot of brands, not a lot of money, but still support from them slowly but surely. As you can see here, for example, like a big brand would be like Intel or PlayStation or Brothers, right? Just to highlight some events that we've done in the past few years. I can go through each one. We also have products. We partner with a lot of these companies to create products, and we get normally we get 100% of the proceeds from these products that we sell as well. So it's bringing in money for research, it's driving attention, and it's also bringing joy to people that buy these products. Like they're happy about it. But we can't do it without our team. Our team is small but mighty. Again, at the end of the day, day-to-day operation is just me and my wife, in addition to taking care of our son 24/7 and our daughter and a full-time job. I want to highlight Ruth, who's still at OHSU right now. Without her and her scientific guidance, we wouldn't be where we are. She helped put together our scientific ecosystem. And then Jessica Wallens is a founding member as well. She helped us with operation early on. And then just want to highlight our board of directors. Everybody, all five of them, has an expertise that we lean on and networks that we can reach out to, and then our scientific advisor. If nothing else, at the end of the day, what our foundation stands for, why we're on this journey is it started with Raiden. It started with one child to create hope, and we hope it inspire other rare disease family in the future and today to make a difference. They can be on this journey as well. They can create a treatment for their child, right? And then ultimately, we just want to bring humanity together. We want to bring people together to make a difference for everyone out there affected by rare disease. There's 400 million people out there affected by rare disease. And with that, I just want to leave you all with a quick video. Here you go.
We have a positive vibes update for you tonight that is out of this world, literally. And we have covered the efforts of a Beaverton family to find treatments and even a cure for their young son, Raiden, who has a rare genetic disease. Well, now his story is on the moon.
So I am one and the Odysseus lunar lander.
Just weeks away from turning 4, Raiden Pham watched the launch of the SpaceX Falcon 9 on February 14th. On board, videos of him and his family detailing his ultra-rare genetic disease.
When he told me, I had to ask him a few times, what are you saying? What do you mean? I don't understand. Why? How are you going to the moon? Like, I don't understand.
What a journey.
So yeah, we launched Raiden's story onto the moon last February as a symbol of like hope and just doing the impossible. And that's the Raiden Science Foundation.
Thank you so much, Tommy. We will now begin the Q&A portion of today's webinar. Remember, if you have a question, please submit them in the Q&A box. The first question you've both touched on to some extent within your presentations about awareness and funding. There's a lot of creative strategies that you both have come up with for raising funds and awareness for your organizations. How did you come up with those? I am very curious.
Do you want me to go first, Penny?
You go ahead, because I think the connection to the gaming community is particularly creative. I would love to hear a little more about that personally.
Yeah, and so so I don't know if it's a blessing in disguise because we gave Raiden's name because I loved playing Mortal Kombat when I grew up, and it's a pretty bloody, gory game, but it's still Raiden. So we knew like if we were to lean into like Mortal Kombat, two things would happen. One, people would dislike it and like, what is the Raiden Science Foundation doing? Like, this is wrong. Like, you should not use a violent game to raise awareness for kids. On the other side, it would go viral and would completely change things for us. All right. And so we have different opinions within our team. I was like, hey, Mortal Kombat 30th anniversary was October 22nd. Raiden was named after the character, and we were to do it around Halloween. I think it should be okay. And so we launched Fight for Air in October of 2022. and it was a huge success. We had, WB coming out to help. We had the founders of Mortal Kombat helping, and we just got the entire gaming community behind us because it was new. No one ever used Mortal Kombat to fundraise, especially for rare disease impacting kids, right? So we took the risk and it paid off.
I
That's
think
what
that
you
is
think
so
you do when you
awesome.
start up a company or foundation, right? You take risk. Where you want to place your bet?
I think that's just incredibly creative, and as you say, you thought outside the box in terms of anticipating that people might have a reaction to it because of the nature of the game, but sort of turning that idea on its head is just really kind of an
We
amazing
knew
thing.
UBA 5 is so rare, Penny. Like at the end of the day, like it's hard to get people to care just about 50 kids, right? It is what it is. So
Yeah.
we have to do something to go viral to get people to care. And now with through Fight for Rare, not only are we focused on like Mortal Kombat, we're focused on a ton of other games as well that people play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's just brilliant. I mean, I would say that ours was maybe a little less creative. I mean, we knew from prior experiences that the families are really the force. I mean, that's where you start, and there's a certain organic growth that comes out of that. But we started by putting an appeal out to families, and it was with a very specific treatment in mind. It's a little different, I think, when you are asking people for money with sort of not a specific goal. I think it really helps when you are, particularly as a foundation, if you have a particular thing that people can give to. If you can, the more you can target it, I think the more people can get excited about it. And sometimes that means breaking it down into specific pieces and saying, okay, now we need this much money for this piece. That has worked well for us at certain junctures, but it was also just a generic appeal for money to get us to the point of being able to run a clinical trial. And, to speak to the grant writing idea, grants take a long time. They take a long time to write. They take a long time to be reviewed. The kinds of grants that can fund clinical trials, it's a long trajectory, and it sucks up a huge amount of time, and the success rate is really quite low. You submit many grants before you get one funded in academia. And also grants to fund the foundational work for the grunt work, to do toxicology studies, to do synthesis work, to do chemistry. Some of the most fundamental work, there is no funding for that unless you can go to sources like the family. And that is what Tommy has done so effectively, I think, by partnering with scientists and just like building something from nothing. I mean, it takes force of personality and frankly, blind faith at times. You've just got to believe that failure is impossible and that you've just got to put your
That's
head
true.
down and keep
We
doing it.
we don't think about failing at all. Like, just don't think about that. That's a negative to us, and we're trying to bring this positive and just keep on going every day, knowing that,
Well,
hey,
Susan and I had a deal that we all would have these days when things weren't going so well, but we had a deal that we couldn't both be having one of those days on the same day. That we always had to have one of us believing that failure was impossible if the other one was in a not such good place, and so I think that worked pretty well. We had a finger shake on that one. So, but the families really, I mean, that's the thing that I've come away with. There is nothing like the power and passion of families whose lives are affected by an ultra rare disease. They know what they're up against, and they can marshal resources and passion and power like you can't believe. It is a force to behold.
yeah, we
Humbling.
keep on on fighting, right? There's nothing wrong. I hope I didn't come up the wrong way. There's nothing wrong with writing grants. The more you write, chances are you win a
Oh
grant.
yeah.
From my perspective, like I'm really racing against time. I cannot spend all this time writing a grant and not get it, right? I can use that time to do something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find this conversation so fascinating because, usually OHSU Innovates, we often talk about startup companies and securing funding for technology and whatnot. It's a very different strategy, it sounds like, when you're working with the nonprofit organizations such as your own. Alexandria Case put a question into the Q&A that I think piggybacks on this nicely. Given that rare disease research often struggles to gain traction compared to more prominent issues like cancer, how did you approach securing funding and interest? What strategies did you find effective in highlighting the unique impact of your work, even though the cure might benefit a smaller patient population?
I can start with that. So
Go for it.
there's a there's multiple strategies to that, right? It depends on how you're approaching it, right? Because fundraising, especially in a nonprofit world, can come through different pool of money, right? And so like one, it's someone might be connected to your personal story, specifically to Raiden's story. Like I want to donate to Raiden his story and the cost, right? Some don't really care about the disease itself and just want to care about making a difference. So then you tell the story of like what you're doing and that you're creating hope. And then some want to donate when your research leads to broader impact for us, not just UBA5, but where else can the research can lead to, how can it affect other disease and other patient as well. So being able to articulate that. So we use those kind of like three strategies, like personal story, right? Underlining theme of hope and how our research impact other rare disease as well.
I don't really have too much to add. I think that summarizes it very nicely. We have tried with limited success to illustrate the ways in which PCAN is related to more common diseases in some settings, but I would say we've had less success with that strategy than using the other strategies that Tommy outlines. And sometimes you can use the personal story most effectively. I would still say that has been the most powerful. When I can show our fundraising video and show children affected with this disease, it has been incredibly powerful. And, I mentioned the videographer. I don't know that I had his name in front of me. It's Brad Sellers. He now has a company called B plus Ray. He's a filmmaker and videographer who's based here in Portland, and he was very generous with his time. He charged us very little money to make a very professional video with OHSU's cooperation so that we could get patient videos here on campus. And he wove them into a beautiful video that was really very effective in fundraising in a variety of settings. So shout out to him.
And one thing I want to add too is like I mentioned those kind of like three strategy, but I don't really think of it that way, right? So a lot of times fundraising to me and raising money is just literally pure grinding hard and just be authentic to tell your story. That's it.
Thank you. We had another question come in about fundraising. This one is directed to you, Penny, from Allison Gregory. Can you comment briefly on the ethical considerations of asking families to fundraise, then considering whether these same families will later qualify for the related clinical trial or other research?
Oh, Allison, you're tricky. Allison is, in our group, and man, she lives this dilemma front lines, I think. So it is tough. I think, the nature of doing a clinical trial is there are often very specific inclusion and exclusion criteria for involvement in that clinical trial that are built around very clear scientific goals and clinical goals. When the end goal is to get a therapy approved, sometimes inclusion of everybody affected with the disease is not the right thing to do because you can actually derail a project by doing that. Now, with this nutritional approach, we took a very all-encompassing inclusion approach. As we move towards gene therapy, we will likely have to limit who is involved in the early stages, at least, of gene therapy for a variety of reasons. And that is challenging. I think it is a challenge that we have struggled with internally and on the ground, because you want to put this broad appeal out, but you also need to be honest with people that this is not a guarantee that your child will be number one in the trial. If you raise the most money, that doesn't make you number one enrollee in the gene therapy trial. And that's a tough thing, right? I mean, some parents absolutely expect that and are very upfront about that. Other parents, I think, have come to an understanding of how this works and what the greater goals are. At the end of the day, though, you are talking to the parent of a child affected with this disease, and we have to take their feelings into consideration. I think there's a balance, a slow educational process as you go through development of a clinical trial, where you try to explain some of these ideas about how trials are designed and why they're designed the way they are. Why we sometimes have placebo controls, why we don't have to have placebo controls in some settings, and how that works and why it works the way it does. And some parents will just not be able to get to the point of the greater good if it is at any risk of expense of my child's outcome. Some parents will, and we just have to do the best we can do. But it is a constant struggle, I think, that requires an honest approach, but a careful educational approach.
Yeah, and I have nothing to add on my end. Penny, you're the expert in that area, so.
Can I piggyback on that and ask about how did you create those networks with families, especially from, I mean, I'm interested in both, but Tommy, you have a son with the condition. You might find it a little bit more of that direct connection with other families, but it also a challenge to seek out other families. And so I'm curious how you made those community connections and build that relationship of trust.
With the UBA5 community? So remember when I mentioned that UBA5 was first discovered back in 2016? And so there were 2 patients in Kansas at the time. So we were lucky that at least they started that community already. They have already created that community, and we just kind of like plug ourselves into like a Facebook group. And then from then it just grew in the past 2 years with us helping drive the science and awareness and keeping them aware and fully transparent on what we're doing. So the community continued to grow. And so as we're growing, as we do more research, as we build more awareness, that grew as well. I don't know if I'm answering that question well enough for you. And so people just hear about it. Now that when you search UBA5, you're like, you know where to go, either through our foundation, which we want to be like the lighthouse for UBA5, or you can search on Facebook. You type in UBA5, like you know where to go. If just child diagnosed, there's multiple ways to find to either our foundation or to our group.
Mm-hmm. I would say social media and the internet has revolutionized how things work in rare diseases, in good ways and in a few bad ways. But the overwhelming is a benefit, I think, that in not so very long ago, if you had a child with a rare disease, much less an ultra rare disease like UBA5 or PCAN, you were never likely to meet anybody affected with the same disease. And the amazing things that have happened because of the web and social media have allowed families from all over the world to marshal resources and to find each other, to provide support, to provide information, not always accurate, but to share information, and to connect to the important research groups they've also, as a researcher and a clinician, they've provided mechanisms for us to remain connected to the community. So, one small illustration of how this can benefit us is that, or has benefited us, is that when we were enrolling for the clinical trial, everybody who was likely to be involved in the clinical trial was pretty much plugged into exactly what was happening. And so we enrolled our clinical trial so quickly, so much faster than we expected to, because people were teed up for it and we had a mechanism to inform people. We also used our own website, as I'm sure the Raiden Foundation does, kind of maintain updates about research. So that's been helpful too.
I mean, having community is helpful, but also informing your community about the research that's happening and also encouraging them to contribute to research, whether it's through like patient data or like even biopsy, right? Because we need that, especially for an ultra-rare disease that's new, we need the research material and being able to educate the community, that is so important.
Hey, we have just 1 minute, and there was one of the questions that I think you had, Nicole, sort of got ahead of times around how the foundation engaged with traditional pharma groups. And so partly because this is a bit of I think it's something that is looking forward. So traditional pharma has been wholly focused on a profit approach, and not-for-profits is just not anywhere in their vernacular. They don't think like that. They have responsibility to stockholders, and they're very much focused on profit. There was suddenly an interest by pharma in being involved in rare disease research several years ago, because FDA offered incentives and patent protections and such to try to galvanize pharma companies to do rare disease research. But it was primarily what I would call common rare diseases, not ultra rare diseases like Raiden's disease and PCAN, UBA5 and PCAN and those types of diseases. So we have had very little interest from pharma, quite honestly. But what pharma usually wants academics to do is to, quote, de-risk the advancement of a therapeutic. They want us to carry the time, responsibility, costs of doing all of the basic work. And then when it is ready to advance to profit, a profitable approach, they take some risk and invest some money. And often, in my experience, it has been at the expense of the academic institution and the investigators, and a lot of the control goes away. And I think that they're not honest with families always about what their goals are. We would love for that world to change. We, the Spoonbill Foundation, and the people who are sort of taking this approach. And I do think anybody who's interested, I'd encourage you to explore what a B corporation is, a benefit corporation. This is a new movement that, what a benefit B Corp certification. It's a designation that a business gets to verify that they're meeting 3 basic principles: that they demonstrate high social and environmental performance, that they make a legal commitment by changing their corporate governance to be accountable to all stakeholders, not just shareholders, to achieve benefit corporation status, and to exhibit transparency by allowing information about their performance to be measured against this entity called B Lab, which is really the driving force behind B Corporation, to be publicly available. And so it is looking at a responsibility to stakeholders, an environmental and a social responsibility. And to me, the diehard liberal, this is so appealing, because I think that we will never be able to move things forward in rare disease research and a funding strategy unless we change the way that we think about this. I think it is possible to have modest profits for rare diseases, developing therapeutics, without it being so driven by profit only. And I think currently the only mechanism to do that in a corporate structure is using a B corporation. There are many great companies that currently have B corporation status. And I would just really encourage people who are sort of interested in thinking about a different way of doing it to go explore the B Lab. You can just look them up, or B Corp certification, and it comes right up on the web and you can read all about it. So I did want to put in a little plug for that before we wrap up.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add to that is we haven't worked with any pharma directly yet, even though, they might have attractive like compound library that we want to test, but IP, intellectual property, becomes an issue. And so we haven't dealt with that yet. And the other thing I've seen with other rare disease foundation is like if a biotech or pharma or gene therapy company might jump in and want to provide some funding, they obtain the IP, and all of a sudden, like, hey, they don't meet shareholders, requirement for profit, whatever,
Yeah.
they stop the program. So all the hard work from the family foundation resulted in absolutely nothing. They lost it all.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be careful about that as well. So yeah.
Well, I know. Thank you both. That was actually one of my burning questions. So I'm glad that Penny, you brought that up. I know that we're over time, and I apologize to folks that we were not able to get to their questions. We did put links to both the Spoonbill Foundation, the Raiden Foundation, into the chat for folks who want to check out more of that. Penny, Tommy, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing
You're
your
welcome.
stories. This was wonderful, and like I said, so glad I had the tissues next to me for it.
Can I add one more thing? I think we're able to accelerate all the research that we're doing through the Raiden Science Foundation. It's because of the knowledge and experience I learned while I was at OHSU in tech transfer and learning from people like Travis. I think Arvin is still there as well, right? Learn from my colleague. And also just learning the experience of being able to build a relationship and making those connections through the Oregon Bio. I see Julia on there. So I was volunteering with the Oregon Bio, I don't know, for 3 or 4 years. So like all that experience really helped, right? It's not easy to start a foundation, just drop the research like that. I was blessed to come equipped with the experience and toolkit to do it.
Yeah. Shout out to Tech Transfer too from us.
Well, on behalf of OHSU Innovates, thank you both so much for sharing your stories today. Those links are in the chat, and we'll also have this session recorded for those who want to watch it later. Take care, everyone. Have a good rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for attending.